My name's Caleb, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. You know, the kind of life that guys would envy. A good job, 2 kids who think the sun rises and sets on me, and a wife who I thought was my ride or die. Now, I'm standing on the edge of a revelation that's unraveling everything I thought I knew. And the irony? It all started with yoga mats and smoothies. Claire, my wife, was never the gym type. Don't get me wrong. She's always been fit, but she's more of a walk around the block or take a Zumba class once a month kind of woman. But something changed 3 months ago when she suddenly became obsessed with fitness. One day, she came home from work talking about a coworker who had convinced her to join a new high-end gym downtown. She practically bounced through the front door, her face flushed with excitement. "They have everything," she'd said, practically glowing. State-of-the-art equipment, yoga classes, a smoothie bar, even personal trainers. I remember teasing her. "What's next? Matching gym outfits and protein shakes." She just laughed. "Maybe. You'll see. This is exactly what I need right now. You know how work's been stressing me out." And I didn't think much of it. In fact, I was supportive. I mean, who wouldn't want their wife to be happy and healthy? But that glow she had that night, it stuck around. Claire was suddenly hitting the gym 5 or 6 times a week. Her mornings became earlier, her nights later. She swapped her usual coffee for protein shakes and started meal prepping things I couldn't pronounce. And her body? Yeah, she was looking more incredible than ever, which, trust me, I wasn't complaining about. Then there was the trainer. His name was Eric. I remember when she first mentioned him. "He's really pushing me to get stronger," she'd said over dinner one night, swirling her fork around a plate of quinoa. Eric's like, "No excuses. It's exactly what I need." I didn't think twice. Maybe I should have, but I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for 8 years, and she'd never given me a reason to doubt her. Until now. The first real red flag came 2 weeks ago. I was in the kitchen, scrolling through emails on my phone when Claire's gym bag fell off the counter, spilling its contents. I crouched down to pick everything up. Yoga pants, her water bottle, and a receipt. The name on it caught my eye, the Metropolitan Hotel. What the hell? My fingers brushed over the receipt, and I felt that gut punch. The one that comes when your instincts scream that something's off. The receipt was for 2 smoothies, not 1, and the date matched a day when Claire had told me she was at the gym. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she'd met a friend. But it gnawed at me. I started paying closer attention. That's when I noticed how guarded she'd become with her phone. The way she angled it away from me when texting. I wasn't stupid. I knew what those signs meant. But part of me didn't want to admit it. Then came last Friday. Claire had left for the gym early, saying she had a personal training session with Eric and then brunch with a coworker. But when I called the gym around noon to ask if they'd found the sweatshirt I'd left behind the week before, the receptionist's words hit me like a truck. "Oh, Claire? She left a couple of hours ago." I hung up, my mind spinning. If she wasn't at the gym, where the hell was she? That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I downloaded a location tracker onto her phone while she was in the shower. I justified it to myself as a precaution, but deep down, I knew I was looking for proof. That proof came the next morning. Claire had an early workout planned, or so she said. I watched her leave, my heart thumping as I opened the tracking app. The little dot representing her location didn't head to the gym. It was heading toward the city center. I followed it. My pulse raced as I drove, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The dot stopped at a building I didn't recognize. I parked down the street, my stomach twisted in knots. The building was one of those upscale condos with glass balconies and a doorman. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Minutes felt like hours before the door opened, and Claire stepped out, her hair slightly messy, her cheeks flushed like they were after the gym. But she wasn't wearing workout clothes.
No leggings.
No sports bra. Just a casual dress and sneakers. And then he appeared. Eric. I watched as he leaned in, kissed her cheek, and whispered something that made her laugh. She looked happy. Happier than she had in months, maybe years. My chest tightened, and I felt the weight of the betrayal sink in. I didn't confront her that day. Couldn't. My hands were shaking too much to even start the car. But the worst part wasn't seeing her with Eric. It was the realization that I wasn't surprised. I'd seen the signs, ignored them, convinced myself that Claire would never do this to me. But now I knew better. And this was only the beginning. When I got home that day, everything felt off. The walls of our house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now seemed colder, like they were closing in on me. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV while Claire was out, probably doing God knows what with Eric. I told myself I needed a plan, but my mind was a tangled mess of emotions. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation. When Claire walked through the door that evening, I studied her. She had that same post-workout glow, but now I knew the glow wasn't from running on a treadmill. She saw me sitting on the couch and smiled, like nothing had changed. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her gym bag near the door and leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head slightly, her lips grazing my cheek instead of my mouth. Her eyes flickered with confusion, but she recovered quickly. "Everything okay?"
Yeah, elite.
She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite figure out. "You sure? You look tense." "If you only knew," I thought. "Just work stuff," I muttered, waving it off. Claire didn't push. Instead, she grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and sat across from me on the armchair, scrolling through her phone. I watched her, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was Eric her first, or had there been others? Did she even feel guilty? I couldn't sit there any longer. The air felt suffocating. "I'm going to bed," I said abruptly, standing up. She glanced up, surprised. "It's only 8:30. "I'm exhausted," I said, not looking back as I made my way upstairs. Once I was in the bedroom, I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed. My mind replayed the image of her laughing with Eric, the way she'd looked at him like he was the only man in the world. That used to be me. I used to be her world. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't just tell me to pack my bags and leave without thinking it through. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my brother, Jake. He picked up on the second ring. "Caleb? Everything okay, man?" "Yeah." I lied again, but my voice cracked, betraying me. Jake immediately knew something was wrong. "Where are you?" "Home." "Is Claire there?" "Downstairs." I could barely say her name without choking on the bitterness. "Give me 10 minutes. I'm coming over." I didn't argue. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts any longer. When Jake arrived, I let him in through the back door, careful not to alert Claire. We headed straight to the basement, where I closed the door behind us. Jake sat on the couch, leaning forward with concern written all over his face. "Talk to me," he said. I took a deep breath, but it came out shaky. "She's cheating on me." Jake's eyes darkened, his jaw clenching. "Claire." I nodded, and for the first time since I discovered the affair, I felt tears prickling the corners of my eyes. I wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "How do you know?" Jake asked, his voice softer now. "I followed her today," I confessed. "She said she had a workout session, but she didn't go to the gym. She went to some condo downtown. I saw her with him. Her trainer, Eric." Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair.
Shit, man.
"I'm so sorry." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "It's been going on for a while, hasn't it? I should have seen it coming." "Don't do that," Jake said firmly. "Don't blame yourself. She's the one who's lying. She's the one breaking your trust." "But why?" I whispered. "What did I do wrong?" Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You didn't do anything wrong. Some people they get caught up in their own selfish desires and forget what they have. You've been a good husband, Caleb. Don't let her actions make you question that." His words should have comforted me, but they didn't. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the good parts of me and left behind a shell. "What do I do now?" I asked. Jake thought for a moment before answering. "You need proof. If you're planning on confronting her or, God forbid, divorcing her, you'll need something solid. Don't let her manipulate the situation and turn it against you. I nodded slowly. Proof. Do you have access to her phone? Jake asked. She's been guarding it like Fort Knox lately, I said bitterly. Then start small, Jake suggested. Check her texts, emails, anything you can. If she's meeting up with him regularly, there'll be a trail. And if you need help, I know a guy. Private investigator, discreet as hell. I hesitated. Did I really want to go down this path? But then I thought about Claire's laughter with Eric. The way she'd looked at him like I didn't exist. Yeah, I finally said. Give me his number. Jake scribbled it down on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Take a deep breath, Caleb. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this. I nodded, grateful for my brother's support. As we headed back upstairs, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter, but only slightly. Claire was in the kitchen when we emerged, washing dishes like it was just another normal night. She smiled when she saw Jake. Hey, didn't know you were coming over. Just dropping by to check on Caleb, Jake said smoothly, not missing a beat. Everything okay? She asked, glancing between us. Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, just some family stuff. Claire nodded, returning to the sink. But as I watched her, I realized something. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was a stranger with secrets, and I was about to uncover every single one of them. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of pit in my stomach that told me my life wasn't going back to normal anytime soon. Claire was still asleep beside me, her hair sprawled across the pillow, her breathing soft and peaceful. I couldn't help but stare at her. How was it possible that someone who looked so innocent could carry a secret that was tearing me apart? She stirred slightly, and I quickly rolled out of bed, careful not to wake her. I couldn't face her just yet. I needed to get out of the house. Grabbing my keys, I drove to a nearby diner and ordered a cup of coffee so bitter that it matched my mood perfectly. Jake's words from the night before echoed in my head. Proof. Don't let her manipulate the situation. That's when I decided. I was going to take Jake's advice and get concrete evidence. No more guessing, no more second-guessing myself. I needed to know exactly what was going on, even if it destroyed me. By the time I got back home, Claire was in the kitchen making breakfast, humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. The smell of bacon filled the air, but instead of being comforting, it made me nauseous. How could she act so normal? Was she that good at pretending? Or was I just that blind? Morning, she said, smiling as she flipped a pancake. I made your favorite. I forced a smile. Smells great. She placed a plate in front of me and sat across the table, sipping her coffee. Jake seemed worried last night. Everything okay with him? I took a bite of the pancake, though it tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Yeah, he's just dealing with some stuff at work. You know how it is. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me for a moment, as if she could sense that something was off. You sure you're okay? You've been acting different lately. I almost laughed at the irony. I've been acting different? What about you, Claire? I'm fine, I said, forcing the words out. Just stressed about work. Her gaze lingered for a second longer before she shrugged and returned to her coffee. Maybe you should come to the gym with me sometime, she suggested. It really helps clear your mind. Yeah, I bet it does, I thought bitterly. Maybe, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The moment breakfast was over, I excused myself and headed upstairs. It was time to find what I needed. I knew Claire kept her phone on her nightstand while she showered, and judging by the sound of running water coming from the bathroom, I had a small window of opportunity. My heart pounded as I crept into the bedroom and picked up her phone. The lock screen was a picture of us from a beach vacation 2 years ago, back when I thought our marriage was solid. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I entered her passcode, a combination I'd figured out months ago, our anniversary. The screen unlocked, and I quickly navigated to her messages. My fingers trembled as I scrolled, expecting to find damning evidence right away. But her texts with Eric weren't there. Nothing suspicious. No late-night flirting or secret plans. Just the occasional generic message about workout routines. I frowned. She had to be smarter than that. I opened her email next, again, nothing. No hotel bookings, no receipts, no messages from him. My frustration was growing when I suddenly remembered something Jake had said. There's always a trail. You just have to look hard enough. I opened her gallery, and that's when I found it. A hidden folder labeled, Wellness Progress. My breath hitched as I opened it. The first few pictures were innocent. Photos of Claire at the gym, flexing her arms or posing next to a treadmill. But the further I scrolled, the worse it got. There were pictures of her and Eric together, taken in what looked like a hotel room. Her hair was messy, her cheeks flushed. In one photo, they were lying on the bed, her head resting on his bare chest. My chest tightened, and I felt the air leave my lungs. But the picture that made me drop the phone was the one of them kissing, her fingers tangled in his hair. I stumbled back, barely making it to the bathroom before I threw up. The sound must have startled Claire because the shower turned off, and a moment later, she emerged, a towel wrapped around her body. She looked concerned when she saw me hunched over the sink. "Caleb? Are you okay?" I wiped my mouth and straightened up, meeting her gaze in the mirror. I wanted to scream at her, to throw the phone at her and demand answers. But I couldn't, not yet. I needed to play this smart. "I think it's something I ate," I muttered. She stepped closer, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Do you want me to make you some tea or something?" I shook my head. "No, I just need to lie down." She nodded, her fingers brushing against my arm in what felt like a hollow gesture. "Let me know if you need anything." I watched her leave the bathroom, my stomach still churning. She was so calm, so composed, and it made me sick. I couldn't help but wonder how long she'd been lying to me like this, pretending everything was fine while sneaking around with Eric behind my back. After she left, I pulled out my phone and texted Jake. "I found proof. I'm calling the PI." The private investigator's name was Tom Reynolds, and by the time I met him later that afternoon, I'd already mentally prepared myself for what I was about to do. He was in his late 40s, wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses that made him look like someone out of a crime drama. "So," he said, sliding into the booth across from me at the diner. "Jake told me you've got a situation." "Yeah," I said, sliding my phone across the table and showing him the pictures. His face remained neutral as he scrolled through them. "Looks like you've got plenty of evidence already," he said, setting the phone down. "But if you want more dates, locations, hotel stays, I can get that for you." "How long will it take?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Give me a week," Tom said confidently. "I'll find everything you need." I nodded, my hands clenching into fists under the table. "Do it." Tom leaned back in the booth, studying me for a moment. "You sure you want to know everything? Sometimes knowing every detail can make it worse." I met his gaze, my jaw tightening. "I want everything. No more secrets." Tom nodded. "Consider it done." He slid out of the booth and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I sat there, staring at my untouched coffee, I realized something chilling. Even if I found out everything, even if I had all the proof in the world, there was no guarantee that I'd ever be the same man again. Because once you see your wife for who she really is, you can't unsee it. And I was already drowning in the vision. For the next few days, I lived in a haze. It's weird how the world just keeps spinning, people smiling at you like your life isn't falling apart. Meanwhile, I was sitting at my kitchen table every morning with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink and a wife I couldn't look at without picturing her in that hotel room with Eric. I hadn't heard back from Tom, the PI, yet, but that didn't stop my imagination from filling in the blanks. How many nights had they spent together? How many lies had Claire fed me? Her voice sweet and innocent as she kissed me goodnight, only to sneak off into his arms the next day. Claire, of course, noticed my shift. "Caleb," she said one evening, her voice soft but firm. "We need to talk." I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch some sports show while my mind replayed those damning photos on a loop. "What about?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the screen. She sat down next to me, her hand resting on my knee like she used to when we first started dating. I tensed. "You've been distant," she said. "Is there something going on?" Did I do something to upset you? My jaw clenched. You did a lot more than upset me, Claire. I turned to face her, the urge to confront her bubbling under my skin. I wanted to throw the photos in her face, scream at her for betraying me. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed Tom's full report before I made my move. So, I did what I'd been doing for the past few days. I lied. Work's been stressful, I said, forcing a tired smile. I'm sorry if I've been distant. Claire's eyes softened, and for a second, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. You know I'm here if you need to talk, she said, her voice gentle. I nodded, but inside, my thoughts were screaming. Talk? You want to talk about how you've been sneaking around with your trainer behind my back? Sure, let's have that conversation. Instead, I kissed her on the forehead and told her I was heading to bed early. I needed to be alone. The next day, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Caleb, it's Tom, the PI said. I've got everything. You free to meet? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Yeah, same diner. See you there. I showed up 15 minutes early, my leg bouncing nervously under the table as I waited for Tom. When he walked in, he was carrying a folder that looked heavier than I'd expected. He slid into the booth, set the folder on the table, and gave me a long, hard look. You sure you want to do this? He asked. Once you see what's in here, there's no going back. I nodded, my fingers twitching as I reached for the folder. I need to know. Tom leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. All right, but take it slow. It's a lot to take in. I opened the folder, and the first thing I saw was a photo of Claire and Eric walking into a hotel together. Her hand entwined with his like they weren't sneaking around, they were proud of it. I flipped through more photos. Them having lunch at a cafe, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Claire sitting on Eric's lap in a car parked on a deserted street. A hotel invoice showing they'd rented the same suite 3 times in the past month. Then, the final blow, a copy of an email exchange between Claire and Eric. Claire, can't wait to see you again. Caleb's been so busy lately, he doesn't even notice when I'm gone. I'm starting to think this double life might actually work. Eric, told you it would. Just give me a little more time to wrap things up on my end, and we'll be free of all this sneaking around. I closed the folder, my hands shaking. The walls of the diner felt like they were closing in, the air too thick to breathe. Tom watched me carefully, his face unreadable. She's planning a future with him, I said, my voice hollow. Tom nodded. It looks that way.
I'm sorry, Caleb.
I leaned back in the booth, running a hand through my hair. What do I do now? That's up to you, Tom said. But if you're thinking about divorce, you've got more than enough evidence to protect yourself. Divorce. The word felt foreign, like it didn't belong in my vocabulary. But what choice did I have? I couldn't stay married to someone who was already halfway out the door. I paid Tom and left the diner, the folder tucked under my arm like a weight dragging me down. As I drove home, I thought about our kids. They were too young to understand what was happening, but they'd feel the fallout no matter how hard I tried to shield them. I had to do this carefully for their sake. When I got home, Claire was in the living room, folding laundry while the kids played on the floor. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, like everything was fine, like we were still the happy family we used to be. Hey, you're home early, she said. How was your day? Busy, I replied, setting the folder down on the kitchen counter. My mind was spinning, my heart racing as I tried to decide my next move. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to throw the evidence in her face and watch her try to squirm her way out of it. But I knew better. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. So, I smiled back at her, pretending everything was normal. But deep down, I knew. The cracks in our foundation had spread too far. And soon, everything was going to come crashing down. The week that followed was like living in a slow-motion nightmare. I couldn't look at Claire without seeing those photos burned into my memory. The way her body pressed against Eric's, her lips curling into a smile meant only for him. Every time she touched me, my skin crawled. Every time she laughed, it felt like a punch to the gut. But I kept it together because I had to. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until Tom Reynolds delivered the full picture. Claire went about her days like everything was normal. She kissed me before leaving for work, came home around dinner, and chatted about her day. But I noticed the little things now, the way she checked her phone more often, the way she smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. It was Eric. It had to be. And I hated how I could practically hear his name in every giggle she tried to hide. By the time Tom called, I was hanging by a thread. "Meet me at my office," he said, his voice calm and collected, like he wasn't about to shatter what little was left of my world. I arrived 20 minutes later, my heart racing. Tom's office was small and cluttered, with old case files stacked on shelves and a faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. He gestured for me to sit as he handed me a manila folder. "You might want to brace yourself," he said, leaning back in his chair. I opened the folder, my fingers trembling slightly. The first photo was of Claire and Eric entering a hotel, the same building I'd seen her outside of that day I followed her. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The next photo was them leaving hours later, both of them looking disheveled. My stomach twisted, but I kept going. There were credit card statements showing hotel bookings, dinner reservations at restaurants she'd never mentioned, and even a charge for a weekend retreat at a cabin upstate. She told me she was visiting her sister that weekend. The worst part wasn't just the evidence. It was how easy it all seemed for her. She hadn't just cheated. She'd built an entirely separate life with him, filled with date nights and weekend getaways. And I had been none the wiser. Tom cleared his throat, snapping me out of my daze. "There's more," he said, pulling out another document. "I found something odd while tracking their transactions. Claire's been withdrawing large amounts of cash, more than what you'd need for a simple affair." My brows furrowed. "How much are we talking?" "Close to $20,000 over the past 3 months, Tom said. "What the hell is she doing with that kind of money?" I asked, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "That's the question," Tom replied. "It's not going to hotels or fancy dinners." I dug deeper, and it looks like the cash is being funneled into a separate account under Eric's name. I stared at him, my mind spinning. "She's giving him money?" Tom nodded. "Looks like it. My guess? He's using her, and she's too wrapped up in whatever fantasy they have to see it." I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Not only was my wife cheating on me, but she was also funding the guy's life. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my hands over my face. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "That depends on you," Tom said. "You've got enough evidence for a clean divorce if that's what you want. But if you're looking for revenge..." He trailed off, giving me a knowing look. Revenge. The word sat heavy in the air between us. I left Tom's office with the folder tucked under my arm and a storm brewing in my chest. By the time I got home, Claire was in the living room, curled up on the couch watching a reality show. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Hey, how was your day?" "Fine." I lied, my voice hollow. I sat next to her, the manila folder burning a hole in my lap. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to throw the evidence in her face and watch her squirm. But something held me back. The withdrawal of cash, the secret bank account, it didn't make sense. There was more to this story, and I needed to know everything before I made my move. So instead, I leaned back and played the part of the loving husband. "What are you watching?" "Some dating show," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. I forced myself to stay still, to not flinch away. I'd give her one more day. One more day to let her think she'd gotten away with it. Then I'd tear her perfect little world apart. By the next morning, my mind was already set. I wasn't going to confront Claire yet. Not until I fully understood why she was giving Eric money. The affair hurt like hell, but the financial betrayal? That was something I couldn't let slide without knowing the truth. Was she planning to run away with him? Or was Eric extorting her? Either way, I needed answers before I made my move. I spent the day pretending everything was fine. We had breakfast together, Claire chatting about weekend plans and a possible road trip we could take with the kids next month. The sound of her voice grated on me, every word a reminder of her double life. She kissed me before heading out to meet a friend for brunch. I watched her leave, then immediately called Tom. "I want to follow her," I told him. "Already on it," he replied. "She's heading downtown. Same area as the condo." That was all the confirmation I needed. I grabbed my keys and drove, the adrenaline coursing through my veins making my hands tremble against the steering wheel. This wasn't about catching her with Eric. I had more than enough proof of that. This was about figuring out how deep the betrayal went. I parked a block away and watched from a distance as Claire entered a cafe with outdoor seating. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was Eric, wearing sunglasses and a smug expression that made me want to punch him through the window. Tom, who was parked a few cars away, texted me. "I've got a clean shot of them. Want me to record the audio?" "Yes." I watched as Tom subtly positioned himself nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone while a tiny mic picked up their conversation. From where I sat, I could only see Claire's face. She was laughing, leaning forward like she couldn't get close enough to Eric. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to lose it. Not yet. After about 40 minutes, they both stood up. Claire kissed him on the cheek before they walked in separate directions, her toward her car, him toward the street. I followed Claire for a few blocks, but she wasn't heading home. She made a detour to the bank. I parked nearby and watched her go inside. Minutes later, she emerged, holding a large envelope. My blood boiled as I realized what it was. Another cash withdrawal. When I got home that afternoon, Claire was already there, sitting in the kitchen with a glass of wine and scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. The sight of her, so casual and comfortable, made my fists clench at my sides. "Hey," she said, looking up with that familiar smile. "You're home early." "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thought we could have dinner together." She grinned, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "I'd love that." The rest of the evening was torture. I sat across from her at the dinner table, watching as she talked about her day while I silently replayed the image of her sitting across from Eric at the cafe. I wanted to scream, to flip the table and demand answers. But I knew better. I wasn't done gathering information yet. Later that night, after Claire went to bed, I listened to the recording Tom had sent me. My hands shook as I pressed play. At first, it was small talk, workout routines, weekend plans. But then Eric's voice lowered, and I leaned forward, holding my breath. "Did you get the cash?" he asked. "Yeah," Claire replied softly. "It's in the car." "Good. You've been amazing, Claire. You have no idea how much this means to me." "Anything for you," she whispered. There was a pause before Eric spoke again, this time more serious. "Are you sure he hasn't noticed anything? Guys like Caleb aren't stupid. He's bound to catch on eventually." Claire sighed. "No, he trusts me. As long as I stick to the routine, he won't suspect a thing." My chest tightened, the words slicing through me like knives. "He trusts me," past tense, as if she already knew that trust was dead. "Just a little longer," Eric continued. "Once I pay off the debt, we'll be free to do whatever we want." Debt? My mind raced. Was that what this was about? Was Eric in some kind of financial trouble, and Claire was bailing him out using our money? "I don't care about the debt," Claire said. "I just want to be with you." The recording ended, leaving me sitting in the dark, suffocating under the weight of what I just heard. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was helping this guy dig himself out of whatever mess he'd gotten into, using the money we'd worked hard to save. I could feel my control slipping. The logical part of me wanted to keep playing the long game, but the emotional part of me, the part that was drowning in betrayal, wanted to blow it all up right now. I closed my eyes, taking deep breaths until my heart stopped racing. One more day, just one more day, and then I'd make my move. Claire had no idea what was coming, and when the truth hit her, it was going to hit hard. The next morning, I woke up with a calm I hadn't felt in days. It wasn't peace. It was the clarity that comes right before you pull the trigger. Claire had no idea what was coming, and that gave me all the power I needed. I kissed her on the forehead as she slept, just for the irony of it. She stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent, and I walked out of the bedroom with a cold smile. Today would be her wake-up call. By noon, I'd set everything up. Tom had sent me a digital file containing all the evidence. The photos, the bank statements, the recordings. I'd synced it all to the TV in the living room, ready for the grand reveal. Felt theatrical, but if she was going to play dirty, I could too. Claire came home from her gym session around 1 p.m. wearing leggings and a tank top, her hair pulled into a ponytail. She was glowing, like she'd just stepped off a treadmill, or maybe out of Eric's bed. "Hey babe," she said, dropping her gym bag near the door. "Want to grab lunch?" I leaned back on the couch, a glass of whiskey in my hand. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" "Sit down," I said, nodding toward the chair across from me. She hesitated for a moment before sitting, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. The screen lit up with the first image, Claire and Eric entering the hotel. Her eyes widened, and she looked at me like a deer caught in headlights. "Caleb, I can explain." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "I'm not interested in your explanations." The next photo appeared on the screen, her leaving the hotel, her hair messy, her clothes wrinkled. I could see the panic setting in as she realized there was no way out of this. "I trusted you," I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. "I gave you everything, and this is what you do. You betray me, you betray our family, and you give our money to that piece of shit." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. Not sympathy, not regret, just pure, cold satisfaction. "I wasn't thinking," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Oh, you meant every second of it," I said, standing up. "You're not just a cheater, Claire. You're a liar, a thief, and a coward." "Please," she sobbed. "Caleb, I love you. I'll fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I laughed bitterly. "It's too late for that." I grabbed the manila envelope off the table and tossed it in her lap. "These are divorce papers. Sign them, and I won't press charges for the stolen money." Her eyes widened in shock. "You wouldn't." I leaned in close, my face inches from hers. "Try me." For a moment I thought she might fight back. But then her shoulders slumped, and she nodded, defeated. She signed the papers with shaking hands, her tears smudging the ink. When she finished, I took the papers and walked to the door. "You have until the end of the week to get your things and leave. After that, I don't ever want to see you again." I didn't wait for her response. I walked out, leaving her sobbing on the floor. A month later, the house was mine again. Claire was gone. Eric had disappeared. And the only sound that filled the living room was the laughter of my kids as they watched a movie. Jake sat next to me on the couch, sipping a beer. "So, what's next for you?" I thought about it for a moment. The pain was still there, but it wasn't suffocating me anymore. It felt like a wound that was finally starting to heal. "Moving on," I said, raising my glass. "To better days." Jake clinked his bottle against mine. "To better days." As the movie played in the background and my kids giggled at the screen, I realized something. I wasn't just free from Claire's betrayal. I was free to start over. And this time, I'd make damn sure no one ever took advantage of me again.